Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of the Daily BizLink. Today, Jane Cebrynski is back, and we will be talking about leveraging and utilizing breathing as a tactic and tool and also a winning strategy. So, Jane, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Liz. I love that we're both wearing our glasses this morning too. So before we begin, give me a 10 moment.
My 10 moment of the week. I think this week I have been more so able to step back and be in that support role for some other people, both in my personal life and professional life. And
Hmm.
because I've, been so grounded and, working on myself for so long, I can now be in more of that advisory role. And it feels really good to help other people get through their stuff. So that's my aha 10 moment of the week.
I love that. I was just thinking about support teams yesterday and how important they are as we're going through change. So I love that you've always been a support to me, and I've been a part of your support team, and I love that you're continuing to grow in that way. So that's awesome.
Well, let's talk about breathing. I think this comes at a great time because I know I've had to take a couple deep breaths just as we've kicked off 2021. But Jane, what are some winning strategies that we can look at as it relates to breathing?
Well, I'm also a yoga instructor in addition to being a life coach. And so I am, very grounded in guiding my students in the breath and how important it is. And I just feel like we are still in a very emotional time. And one of the things about the breath that we know is it improves lung capacity. And with the challenges that we face with the coronavirus, I think that's something that's really important. But what most people don't realize is, we spend a lot of our time in more of a shallow breath. That's kind of what's natural to us. And especially if we're struggling or we're in a high emotional state. And what that does is that actually decreases our oxygen levels and puts the brain in more of a state of stress. And so when we practice more intentional, longer breaths, we actually have the ability to calm ourselves. Science and research have shown us time and time again that the breath has the ability to reduce anxiety and depression and stress and some chronic illnesses as well. And so I just thought it would be fun to kind of talk about for a little bit because we take it for granted. It's always going to be there.
So, Jane, when you talk about breathing, do you mean we need to sit down on a yoga mat in our house and start focusing in on breathing, or what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so the answer is kind of yes. When we're sitting at a desk or in a chair for a really long time and we're kind of slunched over, we compress the muscles that impact our breathing. And so again, we get more into that shallow breathing, and we want to change that and get into more of an intentional deep breath that includes both the inhale and the exhale. So we rob ourselves oftentimes of that deep exhale. And most people don't realize that there are a bunch of different breathing techniques. For example, there's what's called the box breath, which if you think about it in terms of a box, you actually take the breath in and you hold it, and then you hold it at the top and then you let it go for about like the count of 4, and then you hold it again. There's Kundalini breathing, which really comes from low in the abdominals and in diaphragmic. Did I say that? Diaphragm breathing. And then there's pranayama breath. These are kind of yoga terms, but that's when we breathe in through the nose and out through the nose with closed lips. And that's something that we practice all the time. And each of these different techniques really have the ability to change, the way you think and bring you a little bit more into the present moment. And that's what I think is really powerful about the breath, because when you focus on the breath, and it has a beautiful oceanic quality to it, you really get out of your mind. And so we focus on that in yoga all the time, but the practice of yoga is to get you to practice outside as well. And there was an interesting study, not a study, but we breathe on average about 20,000 times a day. And so I was watching this YouTube video by a physician, and she said, if we could have 100 intentional breaths per day, it would improve our overall well-being. Now, how often are we intentional with our breath?
So when we're looking at that, should we set aside like 10 minutes, 5 minutes? Like, what's the duration of time in order for us to truly catch our breath before we go in and start in on our next, task at work or whatever we're working on?
Well, it's a matter of I do a lot of practicing in my car. Number one, because people on the road can really stress me out. And so it becomes a very mindful practice in that moment. But also, taking time in between, it can be for just a couple of breaths. Or you can practice trying this 100 intentional times, which I've done, and it's not easy. But I kind of said, okay, I'm going to do a block of 10 at a time. So I might do it standing at the refrigerator, when I'm getting my water filled, I might be intentional with my breaths. It's kind of like a habit that you can incorporate into your routines. So you can focus on the breath while you're getting ready in the morning, maybe while you're putting on your makeup or something like that. You can use it as a tool before you get out of bed in the morning. So there's lots of different ways that you can incorporate and practice intentional breathing. And I think the most important thing, and why I call it such a powerful tool for emotional management, is because especially when you find yourself getting frustrated, or in a moment where you're getting very angry, you can easily just practice taking a nice deep breath. And the key is to take a nice slow exhale at the same time.
I know a winning strategy for me has just been doing it during times of transition. So whether we're transitioning from one meeting to another, this is great, especially when we're sitting on Zoom calls all day long, to
Mhm.
regather your thoughts and to go into the next conversation cool, calm, and collected. It's really nice just to take a couple breaths in between the two. Or even transitioning from our personal lives to our professional lives. Like, yes, we may have a crazy day at work, but we don't need to take that into our personal lives and with our families. So
Oh, that's so true and so powerful. And that's why I really do recommend that people incorporate it into, some of their rituals and routines. And as you're transitioning out from work to home, to really be able to let go maybe of some of the stresses and frustrations that you might have experienced throughout the day, to set yourself up for success when you come home to your family. It's very grounding, very peaceful, very calming. And that what what really is mindfulness and meditation. One of the reasons people are afraid to meditate is they think, I have to stop my brain. Well, you don't stop your brain. But what you can do, and the more you practice it, is you become aware of when you've left your breath and when your mind has gotten distracted. And really coming back to the breath is meditation. And that is mindfulness. And that's great for overall well-being.
you've given us a lot to think about, and this is something great to be mindful of, focusing in on breathing. But what's the challenge of the week?
You know what? I say go for this 100 intentional breaths per day and just see, keep a little journal and notice what happens when you become very intentional. And so, figure out what's a winning strategy for you to get those 100 in per day.
I love that. Well, and I'm laughing because I know even my Apple Watch will tell me to breathe. So maybe if I
Yes.
start stinking listening to that thing when it cues me, maybe that's a good time to start practicing those 100 breaths. So,
Well,
Jane,
my boys tease me because I have a tattoo that says breathe.
thank you, Jane. I think this is a great winning strategy and appreciate you sharing this great advice with all of our listeners.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Have a wonderful weekend.